Hello, here we are back again. The room's not changing because you guys aren't here to play in it, which is kind of sad, but hopefully you're being able to enjoy being outside because it is a little hot, but it is beautiful outside too. So I hope you all are being able to have a good time. So, we here we are back again, and we've been talking about things in the Old Testament, and we're talking about things that happened way before even Moses. If you've heard about Moses or the Ten Commandments or the plagues, this is all before that, is what we're talking about. And here's the guide that they have. Remember, we talked about Adam and Eve, and we talked about Noah, and there's the rainbow. And then how God started talking with Abraham and said, your children are going to be more than the stars in the sky. And that how in their old age, Abraham and his wife Sarah, that they had a baby boy. And then there was their son Isaac. And God asked a really odd thing. He told Abraham to come up with Isaac to the mountain where they were supposed to do a sacrifice, but there wasn't a lamb, which is what they would use to sacrifice. They didn't have one. But Abraham believed that God would provide, and though he thought for a minute God might have been asking him to sacrifice his own son, instead God provided that lamb, and that was the sacrifice. And Isaac was able to grow up and have children. In this next picture, that's his son Jacob, who had been kind of a tricky guy and a little bit sneaky and had done something to make his brother really upset. So he had to run away because he had been tricky. So now we're coming to the next one. And here you have a picture of a young man, and he is in a multicolored coat. And that's the way that many people know about Joseph. Is one of the big things we know about him is that he wore a coat of many colors. So Jacob, who had been tricky, he did get married. He did have 12 children, 12 sons, and he loved all of his sons. But he did love one of them best, and that was his son, Joseph. Joseph wasn't the oldest, and Joseph wasn't the youngest, but he was close to the youngest. I think there was just one named Benjamin that was younger. And some of his brothers, if you look at this picture, they were quite a bit older than he was. And they didn't like that their dad seemed to like him best. Now, as parents, your parents, we always try to love our kids equally. And sometimes it might not seem that way to one of our kids or to the other. I think sometimes everyone feels like that mommy and daddy doesn't love them best, but your brother and sister might feel that the same way. That's just sometimes what happens. But it did seem like in this story that Jacob, not Isaac, but Jacob did treat Joseph a little bit different than his brothers, and that made his brothers jealous and irritated by them. I don't know if you know that word, to irritate. Maybe your mom or dad might get irritated if mom, every second you keep asking for their attention, and your parent might get irritated. It's like, go away, we don't want to talk to you. That's kind of, I think, how Joseph was. He was a little brother, and maybe he was a little irritating. So I'm going to read today from the Read and Share Bible, just because it covers the story, and I thought it works pretty well. I'm going to move the computer some, try to get it. Here we go. Okay. So Joseph had 12 sons. He loved them all, but he did love Joseph Jacob had 12 sons, and he loved his son Joseph best. Joseph had a lot of dreams, and he liked to tell his brothers what his dreams were, which was maybe something that they didn't like. Well, once he said in his dream that all 12 brothers had a bundle of wheat. That's something that, so here's a picture, but it's something that is up when they are cutting the grass when it's done growing, and they wrap it up to get it ready to put into storage. And this is how they would put it into a bundle like this. And in his dream, there was 12 bundles, and all 11 were bowing down to him. He was the 12th. Well, that's what you do to somebody you really honor. I don't think these older brothers liked thinking about that they were going to be having to honor this young brother. So it is interesting, though. We will see that this that this dream comes back in next week's story. All right. So Jacob gave Joseph a beautiful coat, and it made all of his brothers jealous. One day, and remember, these are farmer type people. They have to go with their sheep, and the sheep eat the grass, and so they're like shepherds. So their brothers were somewhere, wherever they were doing the family work, and Jacob said to Joseph, "Go and see what your brothers are doing. I want to make sure that they're safe." So Joseph went off, and his brothers saw him coming, and they said, "Here comes the dreamer. Let's get rid of him. Uh-oh, what's going to happen to Joseph?" They were up to no good. They had bad plans. Well, you know what? They disliked him so much, you could say that they hated him, which is a very strong emotion. But one of them said, "Let's not hurt him. We're just going to throw him down this well and leave him there." I don't know why they thought that would be better. But this one brother was actually planning to go back and save him. So they took off his coat and they threw him down in this kind of hole, and they left him there. But before the one brother could come back to save him, some other men on camels came by, and they were traders, and they were going from where they were to Egypt, and they sell things in Egypt. So they found this boy and said, "Oh, he'll be a really good slave that we can sell in Egypt." Well, what the brothers did was awful, and now it's surprising things are happening. Joseph becomes a slave in Egypt. Egypt is a country hundreds of miles away from where they were living. But, also this whole time, Joseph wasn't alone. God was with him. God's hand was on him. So here he is being ready to be sold as a slave, and there's a man named Potiphar who came and bought him. So Joseph worked very hard and did everything that Potiphar asked, and he did it really well. And as time went on, Potiphar decided to put Joseph in charge of everything. So he was a hard worker, and he was in charge. And so the other slaves had to do what Joseph said they were to do. Well, as time went on, for some reason, Potiphar's wife got angry at Joseph. And she tried to trick him, and when she couldn't trick him, she told lies about him to her husband. And Potiphar, her husband, believed her. And so they threw Joseph into jail. Now, wouldn't you think that's the worst thing that could happen to someone, to be put in jail? His brothers had sold him, and a lady had lied about it. It didn't seem fair. Sometimes your parents might say life isn't fair, And it sure didn't look like it was being fair for Joseph, but yet God was still with him. God had a plan, and it's kind of surprising what God was doing. All right. So, while he's in jail, he got along well with people. And one night, one of the people he was in jail with had a dream. And he said, "Oh, what does this dream mean?" And Joseph was able to understand what the dream meant. And the man was set free because that's what the dream had sent. And other things like this happened. And over time, Joseph kept answering what people's dreams were, which was very surprising. And he worked hard, and he ended up being in a position of honor amongst the people in jail. He was still in jail. So then the king had a dream. This is how people thought a lot about dreams at that point. And he had a dream, and he could not understand it. And there was some fat cows in his dream, and then there was really skinny, starving cows. Like, I don't know what this is supposed to mean. The guy that had been in jail with Joseph said, "Oh, I know somebody who should be able to tell you what the dream meant." And Joseph came out, and he did. He was able to tell them what the dream meant. And what it was is that there's going to be 7 years where there's going to be a lot of food, and the animals will all have plenty of food, and all the humans, and the grain's going to grow, and their gardens are going to give them vegetables, and it's going to be a great 7 years. But then there's going to be 7 bad years, a drought, if you know that word, when there's no rain, so then the plants can't grow, and if the plants can't grow, the cows can't eat the grass that are in the fields for them, and so then they get all sickly. But because the king had talked to Joseph, and Joseph interpreted the dream, he decided that he needed for Joseph to be nearby so he could talk with him. And as Joseph was with him, Joseph gave him a lot of wisdom, and the king came to depend upon Joseph. And so actually Joseph became really important in the king's household, and he was no longer a slave. It was almost as if he was like the king's son. He was treated so well. So God did a lot of interesting things here we wouldn't have expected. But Joseph went from being the beloved son to being sold as a slave to being lied about and thrown into jail. And that set the stage so that he was brought to the king of Egypt and was able to tell the king of Egypt about this dream, which meant for 7 years they saved a lot of the grass and all the food that they made. They put some aside so that they would have food for the 7 years where there's the drought. So the next lesson is going to talk some more about it. But what we do see is that God was with Joseph, and what looked like it was going to be bad for Joseph came to be good. All right, so that's it for this Sunday, and I am praying that you guys are all doing well and that we will see each other soon. All right, bye-bye.